Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Isaac Newton Institute podcast. My name's Dan Aspel, and I'm the communications manager here. Today, I'm joined by the guest who kicked us off with our first ever podcast. It's director David Abrahams.
Hello, nice to do a little podcast again. It's always enjoyable to talk about things that interest me.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's interesting you say that because that's specifically what I wanted to talk to you about today. Now, we're recording this on the 25th of July in 2019, and that means that there are, I think, 4 days remaining of the Tour de France.
Yeah.
The Tour de France 2019. And that might seem like a slightly left field choice for a mathematical podcast to discuss. However, if you remember from the first podcast, those that listened, we did chat a little bit about cycling because it's a very much a passion of David's. And as well as being the director of the Institute and an esteemed mathematician in his own right, he's also one of the most passionate people about cycling that I've ever spoken to. So we thought in this podcast we could have a little catch up about the competition so far, and then to turn it mathematical, speak about what appeals to you as a mathematician about cycling. So,
right.
David, we're very near the end of this edition of the Tour de France. Geraint Thomas is 90 seconds or so, I think, behind. Julian Alaphilippe. How do you think the competition has gone so far?
So, well, before I answer that, just let me say, I mean, mathematicians have a life outside mathematics, and I do enjoy things, and two of my big passions in life are motorbikes and cycling as well. So I put them in that way because motorbikes, I tend to just love the bikes and don't have time and really the energy or the enjoyment space to cycle and motorbike a lot. But I do cycle everywhere, and I have done ever since a kid.
Yeah, I think your Brompton is directly behind me as we're recording this.
My Brompton is one of those things that I've owned it since 1998, so it was a very early Brompton, but no part on it is existing from the original Brompton yes, that's exactly right. So it recently had a new frame, so it's been through every part, but I've always been a passionate cyclist ever since I was able to cycle.
I remember you came in one winter's day and the frame had split in two.
That's correct.
Whilst you were on it, in fact.
Yeah, and when I was in Oxford, so I don't know whether the frame was telling me something about not wanting to be in Oxford as opposed to Cambridge, but it was an accident that was quite amusing for other people, but not so much for me. But I've had lots of scrapes on bicycles, as most kids do. But coming back to the question, I've always loved the Tour de France, and so we know that it's in the blood of the French. But to people like me, when we were a kid and we used to listen to sport on the radio, and we didn't get cycling on the TV, it was always this incredibly romantic event, and you could see the passion of it. And so growing up from a very early age, I used to read the reports in the newspapers. Phil Liggett used to write a column every day, and I would read that in my dad's newspaper, and then it was on the radio, and so ever since I was a kid, and I was always hoping that one day we would have representation from British contenders, and I had to make do when I was growing up with people like Sean Kelly and Stephen Roach. That was in the 1980s, before your time, Dan.
I was born for part. I was around for part of the 1980s.
And they were terrific. That we had people who were Irish, but English speaking, doing well in the Tour, and then Robert Miller, no relation to David Miller, was a fantastic climber. He was, and he won the polka dot jersey, and they were, of my sort of early adulthood, they were really fantastic heroes of mine, and I just loved that the sort of the gladiatorial spirit of that. This is sport to the extreme. And of course then Channel 4 started showing it on the TV. It used to be half an hour a night, the highlights, and then it became an hour a night, and then ITV4 took it over and then started showing it the odd stage during the day, like on a Saturday and Sunday, and now they show the whole live event.
Yeah, and ITV4's jingle music I'm starting to hear in my sleep at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you watch it during the day, you hear it quite a lot.
Absolutely. So I don't ever tend to have the time to see it live. Maybe at the weekends I'll turn it on at the end of a stage, but my nerves can't bear it, so I sort of I watch the BBC, which gives the live feed update on printed, and then the Tour de France has its little app for your phone which tells you what's going on. So I keep an eye on all of that, but just that passion, and we're now, as you say, at the really sharp end of this tour. The pointy end, 3 massive, incredible mountain stages, when they're all shot to pieces, absolutely exhausted, nothing left in the tank, emotionally shattered, and yet they're having to do these 3 stages, and so who will come out as the winner is anybody's game. And I listen to ITV's podcast every night and the BBC Bespoke podcast. And I completely agree with everything these guys saying. It's too close to call. No one knows who could win. There's 6, maybe even more than 6 riders who could.
So a minute and a half is nothing at this stage.
No, I mean everyone's expecting Alaphilippe really to drop out because what he's done to date has been unbelievable, really, and how he can carry on, just driven by spirit and French passion and joie de vivre and everything. Of
course, speaking of French, Thibaut Pinot has proven himself in the mountains already. So,
well, he's a fantastic bike rider, and we've all known that, and he sort of hasn't performed as we would like. So I feel he looked the best in the Pyrenees, and whether that's translated, but the Alps are different, the terrain's different. They tend to be less spiky, more very long, sort of lower gradients, which maybe Geraint Thomas is more suited to, grinding them out. But the trouble is, his teammate from Ineos is a much punchier rider, and whether that will then create team tensions within that, we don't know. So I'm not going to give you a call. I hope, of course, that Geraint Thomas wins. Being sort of British and wanted to see that, and I understand the need for French to win another tour because it's been a long time, but if you look, since this is the 106th tour, so I'm not going to cry any tears over the French not having won, because they still have had 36 or 37 yellow jersey winners over that 100 and odd years, so a third of them have gone to the French. It's just they've had a lean period. But remember, until Bradley Wiggins, we hadn't had a single yellow jersey winner. So GC, we've got a lot of catching up to make. So I feel that while we've got the opportunity, we should take advantage of that and win a few more before we gracefully give it back to the French for their own race. But I hope the French don't take it. There was a lot of bad feeling with Sky, but I think it's wonderful for the French that the British are so enthusiastic, and we recognise that this is the greatest sporting event in the world, bar none. I think it is tremendous, and it destroys my July because I can't concentrate. So it's fantastic. But so just coming back, I would say,
has this year been distinctive for you in any way?
In terms of the tour, I mean, I think they're all recognising it is a very exciting tour. For those of us who are looking for a British winner, the excitement is not what you want. By this stage, you want a buffer of 4 or 5 minutes. But in terms of looking back, it will be fantastic. And I suppose whoever wins, it will be a really enjoyable tour to reflect on. And anything could happen. We just remember last year going back to Simon Yates, and losing the Giro with Froome winning it in that amazing, what was it, 70 or 80 kilometre lunge that he did late on in the race. So, that might happen in these last 3 stages. So we don't know, and that's what makes it wonderful.
If it is that close, it's only an informal gentleman's agreement which stops any attack happening in Paris on the final day. So if there were a handful of seconds, that's all out the window, surely.
Well, who knows whether convention will out or not, but I would hope there wouldn't. It would be great to see the final stage in Paris being an actual
respectfully
race.
Leaving a 3-second advantage.
I think going around with 3 or 4 seconds is unfair. We should have a good contest. But racing down the cobbles on the Champs-Élysées will be lethal if you've got them all vying for the front and the GC contenders trying to make a break. It will be very interesting. But I hope that they do what happened in the past, have a time trial in the last stage with Laurent Fignon losing to, was it Greg LeMond? That to me was one of the, again, amazing race, and everyone remembers it because it was so nail bite.
I can see why they don't do it every year. But equally, because it's a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah,
the final day.
It would be nice to have it in every now and again.
Yeah.
But I like the way the tour changes very much. Its nature, it's designed completely differently. This year we didn't have a late time trial, which we often do, which then gives an advantage to people like Geraint Thomas, who are great time trialers. This year it was done earlier, so now it's just mountain stages which are to decide. I personally think if it's all mountains and flat stages, so the flat stages the sprinters win, and everyone, the GC contenders are all together, then it's boring because it's just an out and out climber who wins. It's not about that. The whole thing is about strategy. It's about playing your best team together. Those breaks when you have the windy sections are very important. The time trial is very important. So it's the best all-round team and their best rider out of that team who should win the GC in the end, not just the best climber.
Sure.
So.
Well, should we move on to the second half of our conversation, which is...
Sorry, we could chat all day, but...
But as a mathematician, I'm sure that you say that you have a life and passion outside of that, and I believe you now because you've explained it to me.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about how the mathematical part of your mind is attracted to cycling as well?
So obviously when you're sitting there on a bicycle, you think, well, what is it that makes bikes so special? You get something for nothing, don't you? How can you have a vehicle which you don't actually have to power with any fuel except what you've eaten for breakfast and do better than walking? It's quite remarkable. And if it does allow you to move along much quicker, then you'll be much more efficient by definition. You're using energy at a much slower rate. Now, of course, the cheat is that we've invented roads, which in our ancestors didn't have in the past. So you need an asphalt road, so all the energy going into laying a pavement. But once you've got that, then the advantages comes to a bike. So, but of course, bikes come in all different shapes and sizes, so, and they're fit for purpose. But ultimately, we want to ride in the most efficient way. So what does that constitute? And as you're cycling, I think about all of the things. So obviously weight is one thing. The lighter the bike, the less effort you put in. Well, that's related to the friction that the bike causes in contact with the road and the axles and other things like that. So weight is important, but the rolling resistance. So we know that if you've got big fat tyres on, then it's much more effort than thin tyres. But sometimes you need big fat tyres. But how does the footprint of the tyre on the asphalt actually lead to the friction? How do you work that out? Well, that is actually a very, very hard problem. And I'm actually interested in the noise tyres make, so road noise from car tyres. So that's one area of my own research, which I've been doing for many years and never published, but it's still interesting. But then you've got the flexibility, the shape, the frame, the shape and size of the bike to fit you, to maximise how much energy you can give out, and then wind resistance. So,
that's something that I would say as a amateur cyclist. Right, that goes without saying. Very much amateur cyclist. That's what I feel more than anything else is the wind resistance. Some days you can be moving at what feels like a snail's pace. It's agony. And others flying along with no effort whatsoever. It's so dramatic.
It is, and you're right. Over any sort of speed that starts being useful, wind resistance becomes the dominant factor. So I did aerodynamics as an undergraduate. I did a lot of that. So one of the projects I wanted to do, I remember going and talking to some of the staff, the lecturers about it, was about putting something around a bicycle to shield it from the wind. Like motorbikes have.
Sure, yeah.
And they said to me, well, you just can't do it because the weight you would gain from doing that would offset having anything which would make the bike more streamlined. So a fairing.
Because
shape.
the helmets worn in time trials look like fairing for a rider's head.
So they have obviously been designed in a wind tunnel, and time trial bikes are obviously designed in a wind tunnel, but all bikes, I think, with the riders will have time in a wind tunnel, and to get the rider to get into the most aerodynamic shape. But of course, the worse the more aerodynamic, the more uncomfortable it is to ride. And so as a rider riding thousands of kilometres, you wouldn't want to sit in a position which would cripple you. So you have to compromise. But I still believe that with modern materials, that the fairing on a bicycle may be something that could come back in. You could actually try it and make the bike aerodynamic. But bikes aren't very aerodynamic. The spokes are terrible.
Yeah, that's one thing that surprised me is I believe you lent me a book a little while ago which pointed out the vortex of air created by standard spokes is a huge amount of drag. It represents a lot of drag.
So there's many features about aerodynamics, and so the amount of drag is affected by a number of things. It's not just about the shape, but basically, the fatter you are, the more of a bluff body you are, the more the wind resistance it causes. But you can be very narrow and very streamlined, like torpedo shape. But if you've got edges and little things like spokes, then they can create vortices, and that can enhance the effort of swirling up the air, which then adds to the drag. So there's lots of different things one can do, and you can make your suit's much more smoother to try and make the airflow less rough going around you. So I still think there is a lot of work to go into that. But yeah, that's for people who spend a lot of money developing things. The fairing is, I've not seen it coming in, but I think that might be with exotic, very light materials. Then it's possible when you're making a one-piece frame out of carbon fibre to also manufacture the fairing as part of that. It's worth an exploration. This is again something I'll do in my retirement. But coming back to, as a mathematician, I'm always looking at things which fascinate me, and then I showed you something which I'll then repeat to our audience here,
and we'll link to in the description of this episode as well.
So one year in 2012, one of my great heroes, David Miller, won stage 12, and it was a fantastic victory. It was one of these really, he's a rider who rides with panache, as the French say, and he won that stage after a long lean period where he'd been banned for drug taking, etc. But he came back and he did a magnificent job. And then, as ever, I look on to see it, and there on the Tour de France website they had a picture of him with the finish line camera picture, so it showed him passing through the finish line. And so I downloaded it and put it as a screensaver on my laptop. And I was in Graz in Austria at a research conference, and I had a load of my PhD students in, so I excitedly met them for dinner, saying, "Look, David Miller's won." They, of course, didn't have any interest in cycling, were bored. But I realised something weird happened, and it was that the spokes looked really distorted. And the bicycle looked pretty much the same as you would expect from a normal photograph.
Yeah.
But the spokes were all distorted. And I've got a picture on the screen.
The image which you're looking at now, which will be linked to in the podcast description, the spokes are distorted is putting it mildly, really. They appear to be fully formed, and yet they look like an inverted palm tree almost, or the legs of a many-legged spider. So they're clearly not as they were designed to be in that image.
So this is an illusion created by the camera, and I was really fascinated. It wasn't obvious. So as Dan says, he'll post it on the website, and I do urge you to look at the picture and then try and have a crack at understanding how those spokes appear. But let's just say a couple of things which makes it fascinating is when a bicycle's riding along, although you may be in constant motion, you're going at a constant speed, of course the wheel's turning, and the bit of the wheel that's touching the ground is stationary, so it's brought to rest. The centre, the axle of your wheel is moving at the speed of the bicycle itself. And the top of the wheel, if you think about it, must be going twice as fast as the axle is moving. So the whole thing's spinning round, and what's happening is the bicycle wheel is speeding. Well, a point on the surface is being speeding up and then slowing down, stopping relative to you, a person standing by the roadside. And a finish line camera, is not a normal picture. It's a picture of you crossing the finish line, and instead of space being the thing you're looking at time. So if you imagine a vertical strip of a photograph of you as you're walking through it, it takes a picture of you at one instant in time. It takes another picture of you at a slightly later instant in time, a slightly later one. And you take all of those strips and then you lay them side by side, right to left, they tend to do it. And that gives you a picture of the person. And if you're moving at constant speed, then the picture looks exactly the same as it would look if it was an ordinary snapshot of you. However, because the spokes and the tyre itself are accelerating and decelerating, then it distorts the picture.
And thus you end up with something which appears to be completely legitimate. There's no other blurring, is one thing I should point out as well. You wouldn't know that this was such an unusual image.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I would urge other people to look at other finish line photographs, which you tend to see in athletics meetings, to judge who's won, so the 100 metres or whatever. And we'll put up another picture of that. But you can see they look pretty much like ordinary people, but again, their feet or their arms, which are swinging round and accelerating or decelerating, so not constant velocity, will be distorted. Okay, but so what's this got to do with mathematics? Well, in fact, that's very important. So we've talked about aerodynamics. So as someone who works on fluid dynamics, we're not interested in particles of fluid and what they're doing at any instant in time. When you get on an aeroplane, you don't care about what the pressure is for a given fluid particle. You're interested in when that fluid particle is sitting on the wing that you're passing by. So it's when it's on top of the wing, and if the pressure on the top of the wing is lower than the pressure below the wing, then the wing overall has a force acting upwards and it lifts you up. So we're interested in a point in space and how it varies over time. So a finish line photograph is actually what we want many times when we're looking for things. And this is called an Eulerian description as opposed to a Lagrangian description. So even though this is a particular thing, it relates to a lot of the things we do in applied mathematics when we're trying to model things. So, we're interested in not individual blobs of fluid moving around and how they change their temperature and pressure. You want to know how hot the fluid particles are passing by you, and they'll always be swirling, different ones coming and going, but it's what's affecting you that's the most important. In that sense, it's like the finish line photograph, and those distorted spokes end up in the mathematics underlying it. And so to solve the equation to tell you how hot you are in a wind, you will have to solve some equations which are made more complicated because of this fact that you're not tracking the particles. I hope that's a sort of vague glimpse of why it's relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it goes some way to explaining the oddness of that image, I think, and there's so many of the forces which are acting upon you when you're cycling, and we've all done it, because when you're cycling, let's say you're commuting on your bike, you're focused on so many things. You very rarely just sit and enjoy the sensation of being in motion within the air. But if you do have that time, that more luxurious time, perhaps at the weekend, where you can simply sit on a bike, not even going fast, and just enjoy every single sensation of it, every single force upon you, feel the wind, feel the movement of the tyre on the road. It's a really wonderful thing, isn't it? I can see why it's captured your imagination for so many years.
But we naturally do that with everything, don't we? I mean, I think you've come on to a sort of almost a philosophical point here, that man and machine. We create an object which enables us to go beyond our capabilities, and those machines become an extension of us. We feel and breathe, things in a different way. It changes our mindset. And cycling it's a wonderful thing that when a bicycle was invented, it changed social behaviour because people could cycle to other villages and know a much larger group of people than they could do. It enabled them to move stuff around. You had trains and bicycles, and then the car came along quite a lot later. So it's a fantastic device. We've forgotten how important it is, and it's lovely that it's come back again.
Yeah.
And motorbikes are similar, and man and machine on a motorbike has that same sensation.
As you say, it opens up a world of experience which otherwise was impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. But one could think of other examples of that, but perhaps we've
I think that's
gone
perfect.
too long.
I think that's a lovely note to finish on. Just to put it more succinctly, that love comes from what it gives you, the world that it opens up for you.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful thing.
And of course, mathematics enables you to delve into a world of which wouldn't be accessible without the symbols to describe it, and those symbols which other people around the world have a common understanding of, which is what's terrific. But coming back
as international as the Tour de France itself.
It certainly is, and it stretches back into time. We have the legacy of all these great thinkers whom we can rediscover over and over again what they discovered, which is a fantastic privilege. But coming back to the Tour de France, who are you... who are you?
Yeah, we sort of came to it. We had a little disagreement, didn't we, a few days ago? Because I'm just happy for whoever is genuinely the better cyclist to win overall. I have no national interest in who wins. I'd be thrilled no matter who it is, as long as they're clean and as long as that they have proven great spirit over the 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, we'll never know if who's clean or not, but. But no, I mean, you have to have some money in the equation to make it exciting.
From my tiny understanding, I would say that Pinot would be the one I would back, considering it's finishing in the mountains.
Okay,
and how well he's done. Seeing him finish on the Col de Tourmalet, that little sprint at the end where he just left behind the other leaders as though they weren't there, that was hugely impressive to me. So,
well, certainly the French would be very, very supportive of that. I think it should be a few years yet before they get their tour back again, and let's hope the best for Geraint.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks very much, David. That was a real pleasure.
It is a pleasure.
I'm sure we'll catch up again another time soon. And thank you all for listening.